Welcome to Phrasal Verb Practice. This is the place to learn real English, one phrasal verb at a time. My name is Marissa, and I'll walk you through this learning journey. Hi, team. I hope everyone's having a good day. Let's learn and practice the phrasal verb end up. So, let's start with what end up really means. When we talk about end up, there's one main idea behind it, but we use it in a few very common ways. First, we use end up to talk about a final situation or state. This is usually something that wasn't planned. So basically, when we say end up, we're talking about how things finally turn out. For example, we ended up very tired after the trip. She ended up happy with her decision. They ended up late. Now, another very common use of end up is when we talk about actions. Here, end up means that you finally do something, even if it wasn't your original plan. For example, I ended up working all weekend. He ended up buying the cheaper option. We ended up canceling the meeting. And there's one more way we often use end up. We also use end up to talk about places. This is when someone finally arrives somewhere, often by accident or without planning it. For example, we ended up in the wrong office. She ended up at a small company. He ended up in another city. So here's the key point. In all these cases, end up focuses on the final result, especially when it's different from what you expected. Now, let's quickly connect this idea to other languages. In Spanish, end up is like terminar or acabar. In French, it's finir par. In Portuguese, acabar por. In Italian, finire per. In German, am Ende landen. In Japanese, it's zai shōteki ni minaru. And in Chinese, zai hou biancheng or zai zhong jie guo shi. Now, when do people usually use end up? People use end up when things don't go as planned, when they want to explain a final result, when a situation changes over time, when they talk about consequences, or when they look back and explain what finally happened. Let's look at a few clear examples to recap. She ended up stressed after the project. Final state. We ended up staying longer than expected. Final action. He ended up in a leadership role. Final place or position. They ended up choosing a different strategy. Final action. I ended up very satisfied with the outcome. Final state. Now, let's talk a bit about how end up works grammatically. The phrasal verb end up is inseparable. That means we never separate the verb and up. Here are the most common patterns you'll hear. We often use end up with an adjective. For example, end up plus adjective. She ended up tired. End up plus noun. He ended up a manager. End up plus verb ing, very common. We ended up working late. End up plus preposition plus place/state. They ended up in trouble. Because end up is inseparable, pronouns never go in the middle of it. All right, let's finish with some practice. First, you'll listen to a short text from everyday life. Then, you'll listen to another text in a professional or office context. Are you ready? Let's start. Last Saturday, I woke up with a simple plan. I wanted to clean the apartment, do the laundry, and relax a bit. But things didn't really go that way. I made coffee, checked my phone, and somehow I ended up scrolling through messages for almost an hour. After that, I thought I'd start cleaning, but I ended up calling my sister instead because she needed to talk. We talked longer than expected, and when I finally hung up, it was already late morning. I told myself I'd still clean, but I ended up ordering breakfast because I was suddenly starving. While waiting for the food, I decided to watch one episode of a show. Of course, I didn't stop at one. I ended up watching 3 episodes in a row without even noticing the time. In the afternoon, I realized I still hadn't done anything on my list. I grabbed my keys and went out to buy detergent, but I ended up running into an old friend at the store. We stood there talking about work, family, and life, and before I knew it, we had plans to grab coffee. So I ended up sitting at a cafe for 2 hours, laughing and catching up. When I finally got home, the sun was already going down. I looked at the laundry basket and felt tired just thinking about it. I told myself I'd do it quickly, but I ended up leaving it for Sunday. Instead, I made a simple dinner and turned on some music. I ended up dancing around the kitchen while cooking, which actually felt really nice. By the end of the day, my apartment wasn't clean, and my plans were completely different. Still, I ended up feeling relaxed and happy. It wasn't the day I planned, but it was the day I needed. Great, that was the first text. How many times did you hear the phrasal verb of the day? Now, let's move on to the second text. On Monday morning, our team walked into the weekly meeting with a clear agenda. We planned to review timelines and confirm next steps. But once the discussion started, we ended up focusing on a client issue that came in late Friday. No one expected it, but it was urgent, so the plan shifted quickly. As the meeting continued, we ended up reassigning tasks to make room for the extra work. I was supposed to focus on documentation that day, but I ended up taking ownership of the client follow-up instead. It wasn't part of my original plan, but it made sense at the moment. After the meeting, I sat down to write a short update email. What I thought would take 10 minutes turned into something longer, and I ended up coordinating with 3 different teams to get accurate information. By lunchtime, I realized I had skipped my break and ended up eating at my desk while replying to messages. In the afternoon, we had a quick call scheduled with management. It was meant to be a short check-in, but we ended up discussing long-term strategy and budget concerns. That conversation led to new action items, and I ended up staying later than usual to make sure everything was documented properly. Later that evening, I reviewed my task list and noticed how different the day looked compared to the morning. I had planned to finish early, but I ended up prioritizing team needs over my own schedule. Even so, the work felt meaningful. By the end of the week, the project was back on track. The unexpected issue was resolved, and we ended up delivering exactly what the client needed. It wasn't the week we planned, but we ended up stronger as a team and more confident in how we handle change. Great! That was the second text, and that's all for today. Thank you so much for following this channel, and we'll see you next time. Bye-bye.